when these kind of things come up and this is real life. So I'm Alex. I'm excited to be here today to talk about fueling growing bodies, something I'm very passionate about, not only as a pediatric dietitian, but as a mom too. So, and even as a mom in this space, I still struggle to feed my kids sometimes with some of the challenges that they often give me. So here's a few quick disclosures. So this presentation was created independently by me, but with the partnership of the National Pork Board and Iowa Pork. So I am a content creator, and so I've worked with lots of different brands to create content that I can share with parents with brands that I love and trust. So I do have a few disclosures here. The objectives we're going to go over today is identifying key nutrients that are of concern for kids and adolescents. We're going to talk about their roles as well as some key sources of those nutrients. We're also going to evaluate practical and culturally relevant strategies to help increase those nutrients and actually help kids eat and enjoy food that we want them to eat. We're also going to apply some flavor-first approaches with emerging nutrition trends and some really fun evidence-based strategies to help them learn to eat more of the nutrient-dense foods that we really want them to eat. A little bit about me. As you know, I'm a pediatric dietitian and mom. I was actually a former school food service dietitian, so that's really where I started my career and have my passion for feeding kids, lots of kids. And I didn't bring my food costumes today, but oftentimes you'll see me on social media or even at conferences wearing my one of many food costumes, but I came close today with my attire. So, but my food philosophy is very simple when it comes to feeding kids or really any age, is that I focus on nutrition by addition instead of restriction. I also like to make food fun and not so feared, especially in our online world today. And I really like to add the nuance to nutrition. That's been a really popular word lately, I think, and it's been really relevant in the last year or two with all of the hot topics that we see floating around on social media and online. So we will jump into this and talk about the reality of kids and their health in the United States right now. I think this is all fairly familiar to a lot of people that we're not necessarily trending in the direction we want our kids and our children to. There's lots of initiatives going on right now to help make improvements. So 1 in 5 children right now are obese, and that trend is going up, especially with adolescents and teens. 67% of children's calories come from ultra-processed foods. And so we know they're leaning towards those convenient, easy-to-eat foods. However, I do want to say that I'm going to add the nuance here with nutrition, that ultra-processed foods do tend to get a really bad reputation. However, there is a place for some of them, right? They can make some healthier foods be more accessible, easier to eat. So there is a place for that, and right now at the federal level, we're really looking at kind of defining that term a little bit more because it really doesn't take into account nutrient density right now, and that's something we really need to define before we start labeling all foods, ultra-processed foods you should eliminate and never eat again. So that's worth keeping an eye on. Type 2 diabetes is increasing as well in children, which isn't something we used to see. And then what we're going to really talk about today is that children are falling short on some really key nutrients that are important for their growth and development. So this picture really is how I feel when I go on social media and I hear parents or influencers talking about nutrition, especially in the parenting world. Sometimes it feels like we're taking a microscope to ingredients in foods and we're just overanalyzing every tiny little thing, and we're missing kind of the big picture of when it comes to feeding kids and feeding ourselves. And so we are spending so much time on micromanaging every little ingredient, and so it's causing really a lot of fear and guilt for parents and families. Like, what do I feed my kids? I can't feed them this, I can't feed them that, that's bad, that's toxic, and all of a sudden you're out of options because because you can't eat anything processed because that's bad. But as most of us in the room here know, almost everything goes through a process, and there's a lot of nuance that's involved in it. So this can really lead to a lot of overwhelm, anxiety, guilt, and really unnecessary barriers to affordable, accessible foods for people. So we really want to make sure, my goal is to really make sure that we're helping parents feel it's about overall balance and helping add foods for kids instead of micromanaging every ingredient and nutrient that is on a label or in the grocery store. So again, going back to my food philosophy, which you'll hear throughout this presentation, is I really want to shift from this fear-based nutrition of we can't have any of these processed foods, packaged foods, even fast foods. We can't eat any of these, which creates a lot of restrictions, rules, and a lot of guilt. And so I want to have this mindset shift and challenge parents and individuals to think about nutrition by addition instead. So maybe not eliminating all of these, but adding in a variety of foods that fuel our body and our soul, because food is emotional and we can't take that away from people completely. So it's not necessarily about eliminating all of these, especially when it comes to our kids' favorites, because the reality is we're going to eat some of these foods. And we should be able to eat some of these foods. So it's more of a balance. Yes, it's fruits and vegetables and whole grains, but maybe it is some chips or some canned fruits and vegetables, or some flavored yogurt if that's the only thing your kid will eat for protein. So it's more of a shift is what I want to encourage parents instead of having this fear behind everything we're deciding to buy for our families. And so this is a really great way to sum it up. It's focusing on addition, not restriction, helps kids build a positive, lasting relationship with food while also moving closer to filling their nutrient gap. So what I like to tell parents is when we focus on what we can add, we kind of naturally move out the things that maybe we need to eat less of. So that's just a much more positive way to think about it instead of, oh, I can't eat my favorite foods, or you're telling me I can't have this candy or these chips. So something that I really, really want to emphasize. So now we're going to go a little bit more in depth. This is probably an overview for most of you in the room, just talking about some of the common nutrients, what they do for our bodies. But these are the ones specifically when it comes to children and adolescents that we're really falling short on. So we have calcium, vitamin D, dietary fiber. We all know we can eat some more fiber despite how everything seems to have more fiber in it nowadays. Potassium, iron, choline, and also high-quality protein. So I put that in there because a lot of our foods and calories do come from ultra-processed foods, right? But so we want to move towards more whole foods, lean quality proteins, instead of maybe as many processed foods. So we'll go over these quickly, but each one I have calcium here, which we know is great for our bones and teeth, but also for nerve, muscle, and function. The Dietary Guidelines for Americans actually has calcium as a nutrient of concern because all ages really aren't getting enough calcium. But something that's interesting is that school meals, you'll hear me talk a lot about school meals here as a passion for school meals and the opportunity that it has. But they help close that gap because of milk that's offered with reimbursable meals. Not every student takes a milk, but more kids do take milks. And there's actually packed lunches only have about 3% of them will pack milk. Now, kids can, of course, grab a milk at school if they'd like to, but we know that more kids are drinking milk, which is an option for calcium, than those that are packing lunch. So, common sources of calcium, obviously we have our dairy products, but you're going to hear me talk a lot about fortified foods and the importance of these when it comes to these nutrient gaps. So, some kids can't eat dairy or maybe they don't even like the dairy alternatives. Well, that's where we have fortified options too. Well, we have fortified milk alternatives, but fortified orange juice we can get calcium from. Tofu, maybe not as kid-friendly, but it's something we can start to introduce more, even to those families that are meat eaters as well. So I have provided examples of what that might actually look like for kids throughout the day, whether it's at home or at school. But for breakfast, you know, we could have a yogurt parfait with fruit and granola. You can throw in some fortified orange juice. Mongolian barbecue pork quesadillas. So this sounds so good to me. I haven't tried them, but they're a recipe from it's a Pork on the Plate resource that I'll share later that School Foods Rocks and Pork and Partners have created an ebook. So that will be available for you guys to check out later, but it's for K-12 schools to help implement realistic recipes for lunch menus. Then you could also offer like a tofu stir fry with broccoli, and so when I worked in school food service, like we had a lot of requests for more plant-based menu items. However, whenever we put them on the menu, they tended not to be super popular, which, you know, Meatless Mondays were not high participation days, which that's fine, but we still want to be able to offer these. So what we did instead is we offered 2 entrees. We would just make less of like the tofu, like an orange tofu, and then we would make a lot more of the animal-based protein. So we still had it as an option, and then we would sample those as well if kids wanted to try. You're not going to skyrocket participation with that or get all the kids to try it, but at least it's something. Next, we have vitamin D, which kind of plays a role with calcium with our bone growth and calcium absorption, immune support. And again, another nutrient of concern according to the dietary guidelines for Americans. And going back to the fortification, vitamin D fortification, especially with milk, cereal, and juice, actually has shown to raise blood levels and lowering deficiency in kids. So fortification plays a huge role in our kids' health. Sources of vitamin D, we have fatty fish like salmon, fortified orange juice, egg yolks, so don't skip the yolk necessarily for kids. UV exposed mushrooms. Now I know not a lot of kids, even adults, are into mushrooms, but we can talk about that as well, something up here. But my son actually loves mushrooms, so he's like one of very few people I feel like in my life that I know that loves mushrooms, but I'm all for it. Milk as well for vitamin D. So vitamin D in action, we might have cereal, milk, fortified orange juice. Again, I know cereal can have a bad reputation too, but there's so many opportunities for nutrients that we can find in some of these foods that are kid-friendly, accessible, easy to eat. Kids can pour themselves a bowl of cereal. We can lead families to maybe lower sugar options that might be easier, but there's so much value still there. Lunch, maybe pork fried rice with that egg in there, and then a more kid-friendly version of salmon might be more of a salmon burger where they can maybe add lettuce and tomato if they want, and add some milk as well. Nutrient of concern, again, fiber. 5% of Americans are not getting enough fiber, so very important that we are making sure that we're encouraging those fruits and vegetables and whole grains. It's good for gut health. It keeps kids fuller longer, which if you're a parent, the snack requests are very frequent, and so if we can keep kids fuller longer, we might get less snack requests in there. So the one thing that's confusing with fiber is that there's not necessarily a specific recommendation on how much for kids, so there's kind of some conflicting advice on recommendations on that. I tend to use what the American Academy of Pediatrics does because it's simple, it's their age plus 5. So a 5-year-old needs about 10 grams. Most kids are falling below what they need anyway, so we just want them to eat more. So I don't like parents to focus on micromanaging how much or milligrams or any of that. I just want them to try to eat more of these things. So some interesting facts though about fiber is that when it comes to family meals at home, it's something I really encourage people to do, even if it's just like a pizza night. It doesn't have to be like a super fancy night. But eating meals as a family can be so valuable, not just for nutrition, but academics, social emotional skills, self-esteem, all of that. But an extra 10 minutes at meals sitting together has been shown to help increase fruits and vegetables, right? They're sitting there longer, they might eat more. So that can be a big piece. And then school lunch has been shown to kids who eat school lunch actually eat more fiber and they have more produce. We know that kids eat more fruit when it's sliced or when there's salad bars available for kids. A lot of times at home, then I'll offer a salad deconstructed. So then instead of everything all in the bowl, or kids are like, I don't want that because there's one thing in there that I don't want, we can offer things deconstructed so they can try different ingredients and maybe eat some vegetables instead of no vegetables. But another interesting fact is that pork is often eaten with produce. Research has been able to show that, like lettuce, tomatoes, apples, and bananas. So it's a natural what we call carrier food. So it helps bring more nutrients along. Lunch meat, which I know is a processed meat, which we want to kind of minimize a little bit. This is where I want to add my nuance and my nutrition by addition. That when there's foods kids really love, like sandwiches tend to be an easy option. Yes, we don't want them to eat processed meat every single day, but it also has been shown to have higher calcium, potassium, thiamine, and total fruit and whole grains because it's a carrier food. So you can eat it with sandwiches and things. So there are some things where we have to have a bigger picture in what is our overall diet. It's not that we can't ever eat lunch meat, but like how can we leverage some of these foods so that they can get in more valuable nutrients as well. So sources of fiber obviously are fruits and vegetables and whole grains. I wanted to walk through a few examples of these. Apple slices are a great one either at school instead of whole apples. I don't know how many people have been in a school lunch cafeteria and seen how many whole apples in the trash, which is so sad. But sliced apples research shows we eat more of them. They're easier to eat, especially for kids with braces. At home, I love to make apple fries with crinkle cutters. And they look like French fries, but they're not French fries. Not trying to pretend that I'm going to be French fries, but it's amazing how when we can change the shape of a food, when kids will be more willing to eat it. Beans and lentils, not always a kid favorite, but what I like to do is I like to add a can of beans or a can of lentils to family favorites like sloppy joes. I'll add canned lentils, or to spaghetti sauce or taco meat, those kinds of things. So it's like you're not sneaking it. I don't love that, but we're also stretching the meal so it makes it go further as well, which nowadays is so important to help people with their grocery budget. So love doing that. Quinoa, not always maybe a common staple in a lot of households. It's more and more popular. I don't think I really knew what quinoa was when I was growing up, but now I sure do. So something we did when I was in school food service is we had a burrito bar line, a taco bar line. And we used to always serve cilantro, lime, brown rice. Well, we decided to do half quinoa, half brown rice. So it's those small little shifts that where kids don't always notice that much, but then they're still getting those nutrient-dense options. So it's not about completely changing and overhauling menus or what you feed your kids, but it's about how can we work it in with things that are already familiar to them. And I wanted to make sure, I give a shout out to canned fruits too, can have so much value. They're easier for kids to eat sometimes because they're softer. A lot of times schools go to them because of the convenience. So that can be a great option. And then things like vegetables, if we're serving them in different ways, we're cutting them into crinkle fries or roasting them with some really great seasonings and sauces to make them a little bit more desirable. So fiber in action, I talked about quite a few of these, but breakfast, doing oatmeal and diced fruit. If you want to get really fancy, you can throw in some ground flaxseed for a little bit more fiber. But lunch, we're doing those burrito bowls can be such a great option, and they naturally carry along some other ingredients like fruits and vegetables like lettuce and tomato. And again, if anyone, I know we're in the Midwest, I'm from Minnesota, so sloppy joes aren't known across the nation as much, but I know you guys know what that is here. But I love adding lentils to my sloppy joes, so that's something that I cook a lot of friends and family onto, so just an easy add-on to try. When Moving on to the next nutrient, it seems like this is such a long list of nutrients, but potassium. So important for blood pressure, nerve, muscle function, hydration. Again, another nutrient that the dietary guidelines has as a nutrient of concern. And what's interesting is that pork intake has been shown to, those who eat pork actually have more, or they're meeting potassium needs more than those who don't. So something, again, is carrying along those fruits and vegetables that we know are going to be sources of potassium, like our bananas, potatoes, raisins, avocados, milk. And if we're looking at it as a menu, maybe we're encouraging fruit and milk smoothies, so bananas. You could even add in avocado to smoothies. I get frustrated with the short window that avocados tend to have when they're ripe. But a lot of times I'll buy actually the frozen avocado chunks from the frozen section by the fruit, and those work great to throw in as well. Lunch, maybe a pulled pork sandwich, and we're adding those roasted potatoes, raisins on the side as a quick, convenient option. For dinner, chili with beans, but where I like to actually add in edamame as well to my chili. But cornbread, and maybe we're adding on some more ingredients too, like avocado, sour cream, cheese, that are also going to have the potassium in there. Iron is probably one of my more favorite things to talk about in terms of nutrients that are important for kids. I think it's overlooked quite a bit, but it's so important for our brain development and energy and transporting that oxygen to our brain. And really, it is a concern for kids, but mostly for toddlers and for adolescent girls. And so what we know is that also kids in food insecure households are almost 3 times more likely to have iron deficiency anemia. So heme iron, which we know is more absorbable, is great, right, from animal sources, more absorbable. However, I'm going to go back to, again, the enriched options as well are going to, especially in those food insecure households, the cereals and the enriched pastas and those things can play a big role in providing more iron for kids. So we have those animal sources of iron like pork, beef, beans and lentils, enriched grains, fortified cereal. These are all going to provide different variety of iron, of course, depending on which product you're choosing. In iron in action, we have cereal again with citrus fruit, which we know vitamin C can help increase that absorption. So we can let families know that that can be a tool they can use. Pork and bean tacos, again, we have the citrus from lime that can help with that, and then spaghetti with fortified pasta and meat sauce, which, again, we have the vitamin C from the tomato sauce that can help with that as well. Choline, which is important for brain development, memory, and neurotransmitters, is one that I feel like has just started to come to the forefront and is talked a little bit about. A lot of parents don't necessarily even know what it is, but most kids fall short on it because there's not a lot of options, and options maybe that are super kid friendly. But pork consumers actually have higher intakes of choline, which is always important to figure out what are those foods that are carrying other nutrients as well, are helping us get in more nutrients. And it's a good source of choline, pantothenic acid, and phosphorus. So sources of choline, cod, which we all could be eating some more fish too, but pork, eggs, edamame, which is one of my favorite things to introduce to kids. I call it a fidget food because it's so fun to like pop out the little pieces of the edamame soybeans. Those are fun. And it's a complete protein or a plant-based protein. And then we also have milk as well. So you can see here's choline in action, what that might look like. For lunch, there's a Thai sweet chili pulled pork with edamame that's also in that resource from School Food Rocks that I'll share at the end. So we went over all of that really quickly, but really, that's great. It's great to know, okay, where are kids falling short? But we need a how, right? How are we going to get kids to actually eat more of these nutrients we want them to? And the solutions really require variety, and because kids have different preferences too. Not all kids like the same things. I know we use the word kid-friendly foods, but we have a lot of different preferences out there for kids. There's also, we need things to be flexible. We can't be too rigid and restricted with what we're asking families to eat. Accessibility and affordability, those are a huge thing that are really, we're talking a lot about right now, and making sure that those healthy options are affordable and accessible. Because at the end of the day too, if we can't afford some of these fruits and vegetables, or they're harder to access, it's hard to ask people to meet these recommendations, which we know most people aren't meeting the dietary guidelines anyway. So now we're going to talk about where we can make the biggest impact. So I have a picture here of school cafeteria and a dining room table at home. So raise your hand if you think the biggest impact we can make on kids' health and their nutrition is in schools. Raise your hand. Okay, a few, okay. I was really interested to see what people thought. How about at home? Okay, what about both? Yes, okay, right. I mean, kind of a trick question. So what's really important to know is that school meals, they serve 30 million lunches a day. So there's a huge opportunity to have an impact in school meals, and they're already doing so much. And they serve 15.5 million breakfasts each day. So for many, school meals provide the majority of their daily nutrition for a lot of kids. And it's their most consistent access to nutrition too. So, and we know that kids who eat school lunch eat more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and nutrient-dense foods. So there's an opportunity to have more kids eat more school lunch. Because we know what they're eating at school doesn't always reflect what they're eating at home either. But at home is where we learn from our parents, and we're modeling healthy habits, and that's where the voice of consistency usually is in the habits that are created. So we definitely can utilize both. It's not one or the other. It's really trying to make an impact together. We're going to talk a little bit about how to kind of bridge that gap, because sometimes there just feels like a disconnect between school and home and what we're eating. And sometimes that creates some frustration with parents too, with what they're getting at home that they get at school and vice versa. So the reality of school meals, here's one of my costumes during COVID, a cheeseburger, during the picking up meals on the curbside. But school meals, I think, they do so much with so little. And is anyone here in school meals? I know there's a talk. Okay, I see you shaking your head a lot, like, yep. Those that are in school food service, we're very passionate about feeding kids. And I have started to do a little bit more advocacy for school meals and just try to teach parents a little bit more about it too, because there's so much behind the scenes that people don't realize. But they're doing so much with so little. And the nutrition guidelines are evidence-based. They're providing very nutrient-dense options. There's always work to be done, but they have extremely tight budgets. They're trying to create a meal with 5 different food groups, like for less than the cost of a latte. It's just wild to me what they're able to do. But all of these different challenges that we may not face quite on the level at home. So that's always something I like to remind people of. But with these nutrient standards that the school meals have, they really aren't, alone they're not enough. Kids aren't going to eat food just because it's healthy, even if we want them to. Adults don't always do that either. They have to actually want to eat the food. So, and fighting with them is not the answer. So we need practical strategies. We need things to taste good. We need to maybe lean on some of the food trends that are happening. We need to implement global flavors. Convenience, we gotta lean on convenience as human beings. We need the easy path, usually. And like you've heard me talk about carrier foods. Carrier foods are something I think we need to lean on more as well. Especially when it comes to kids, and there's foods they love, we don't want them to eat as much, but maybe we can leverage those a little bit more to help them eat others. So flavor first. We know that kids, one reason why they may not participate in school lunch, for, let's say, is that they don't like the options. Maybe that's flavor, maybe there's other reasons behind that. And maybe parents have their own things with school menus, but we need to make sure the flavor is there. And that's difficult to do in school meals when we're limited with sodium and salt. But at home, what we can do is we can make sure we're adding dips and sauces for kids to eat those fruits and veggies. I say a veggie with dip is better than no veggie at all, despite how some people feel about dips. We can do family taste tests. We can offer I like to offer my kids little mini spoons that have a little taste sample. DIY seasoning blends. At school, a lot of schools are already doing flavor stations where they can have their own low sodium seasonings they can add, or marinades, offering dips. I don't know how many times I've seen school menus and they have baby carrots and fresh broccoli and then there's no ranch, and I'm like, well, I wouldn't want to eat that either maybe. So seasoned, colorful veggies. Here, this is a picture of one of our lines we had where we sauteed fresh veggies on flat top, and that was really visually great for kids and had great flavor. So food trends, if anyone's on TikTok and social media, that's kind of a big deal for kids. It creates fun and novelty with, when you're talking about like littler kids, I always love to do new shapes and colors, changing things up, like I talked about the apple fries, but for older kids, it might be more peer influence. So when they see foods on TikTok or YouTube and they want to try it, suddenly like sushi or a smoothie bowl is cool. It's not just, it's also healthier, but it's also really cool. So you kind of have to lean into that a little bit. Anyone familiar with the 6, 7? My kids are driving me nuts with that right now, but like maybe there's an opportunity to lean into that, you know? So you have to kind of run with those things too, even though we might think they're silly, but we gotta go with what kids like. Kids love autonomy. That's a really important word for human beings, to be able to have choice. So when we can give kids choices, whether it's at home, doing deconstructed meals and letting them decide what goes on their plate, or deconstructed bars at school too, like a burrito bar, a pasta bar, doing those kinds of things. Kids love to customize and have a say in how they build their meals. So that can be really powerful. And then restaurant-inspired meals, especially in the school cafeterias, kids really want to see kind of what looks similar to them where they're eating out. So whether that's burrito bars or sandwich style, where you can make your own sandwiches, that can be really helpful. The bento boxes, to-go boxes, those are a great little thing to include as well. I mentioned a little bit about global flavors, but kids really tend to lean into this, especially at the school lunch menus. And there's so many options. And what's great about global flavors is they tend to bring in multiple food groups. Again, it's kind of that carrier food we talked about. So leaning into trying new global flavors can be really, really helpful. Especially with the older kids as well. But introducing them at a young age, and maybe the kids just try the sauce instead. And my kids will do that a lot, where they just eat the white rice and the naan, but they don't necessarily want the curry chicken, but they'll try the sauce. And that might not seem like it's like, oh, they didn't even eat anything, but it's still exposure and helping them to learn to like different flavors for someday. Leaning on convenience, we want to make sure that we are making things easy. We want the healthier choice to be the easy choice. So, ready-to-eat produce, sliced fruits and veggies. I'm a big fan of salad kits at home. My kids actually like a Caesar salad, so I always make sure I have on hand an easy salad kit to throw together really quick. When it comes to school, has anyone heard the term choice architecture? Raise your hand if you heard choice architecture. Some of you? Okay. That is a really great concept where we're essentially, like, there's people who have, this is their job, and it's fascinating to me, but their job is to just design and place things in a way that makes us automatically make healthier choices. You do this a lot in school cafeterias, whether you have like the fruits and veggies first, or you put like the healthier menu entree as the first option, and people just tend to choose that automatically, kind of. They go to that more often than not. Or one thing too we would do is to complete a reimbursable meal, you have to have a half cup fruit or vegetable on your tray for school meals. But we would have the fruit and vegetables at the register, sliced apples and carrots, and instead of the a la carte chips and stuff like that. So making sure it's the easy option there. Another thing too with convenience and making sure you're marketing to kids is really what you're doing, but we have to do it in a mindful way, right? One thing we would do at lunch is we would do samples of smoothies. And the smoothie recipe we had, it was for breakfast, but it was actually a complete reimbursable meal all in itself. So we could market to kids, try this smoothie here at lunch today, for breakfast tomorrow, you can get it for free. So you have to kind of do those things strategically so that kids, it's easy for them to make that choice too. And then we have the dairy and the fruits in there as well to get them those nutrients that they need. All right, so carrier foods, I've talked a lot about those, so I don't need to go a ton in depth, but basically we are leveraging foods that help bring other ingredients in foods that we really want, whether it's sandwiches, stir fries, tacos, pizza, all of these foods have opportunity to add more value. They're foods that kids love, so we don't have to look at all of the carbohydrate-rich foods that our kids tend to gravitate to as a negative. How can I leverage this to help them eat other foods as well? So I talked both about home, eating at home and eating at school, school lunch and breakfast, but there's kind of this disconnect. So things that schools and families can do to kind of help bridge that gap. And a lot of schools are already doing this, and which is great. And it kind of takes a more robust team sometimes because they're always so busy. But we can share more of what we're doing in school so that it inspires families to maybe let's make that at home. I just was talking to someone about how their child had spinach at school and now they want to eat spinach at home. Kids try a lot of foods at school that they might not get access to or try at home. So there can really be this opportunity to help kids learn to try new foods too, which is great. QR codes for recipes that schools are featuring on their menu that kids really love. You can share that. Connecting with the social media team and marketing teams at schools so that we can make sure we're communicating and sharing what we're doing, because there's a lot of opportunity in school meals, all the healthy things they're doing to incorporate that at home. Taste tests and demos can be huge, not just at schools, but at home too, and letting kids have tastes instead of forcing them to try different foods. Cultural connections, I think it's really important to consider at school meals how we are highlighting the different cultural foods that might be present in our community that other families are wanting. So we can try to communicate with families to see, what would they like to see on the menu and how could we incorporate some of their family favorites into that. And then positive framing. We can do this both at school and at home, and that's the nutrition by addition mindset instead of demonizing and talking negatively about food, but it's how can we help kids learn to add more value and enjoy the foods that they love. So a few takeaways. We're getting close to time here. So kids often fall short on the key nutrients: iron, choline, vitamin D, calcium, fiber, and potassium. It's a long list and it's a big thing to try to change, but they're important nutrients. High quality protein is something we can shift towards more as well for growth and learning. And schools are a major opportunity, but they serve millions of kids every day, but we can also help make sure that families at home are being able to reinforce these habits as well. Practical strategies: flavor first, convenience, leaning on food trends, global flavors, and leveraging those carrier foods. And so one thing that's interesting too is that pork is the leading global protein actually, and is incorporated a lot in those restaurant style meals familiar restaurants, but it's not necessarily leveraged in K-12. So there's an opportunity for that carrier food, for that nutrient-dense option to be incorporated more throughout meals as well. So here's the pork on the plate recipe resource I talked about. You can use the QR code here to download it. Great resource, lots of yummy recipes. But I think my next slide is questions, but I'll leave this one up here. So there's a lot of stuff, but if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer.
If you have a question, raise your hand. I'll bring you the mic.
I lost my voice, so bear with me. When you talk to parents, specifically those that are maybe concerned about their child's weight and the food choices that they're making, and they might have like a negative tone around either their weight or the choices that their child's participating in, how do you counsel both the kid and the parent, but specifically the parent when you're talking about some of the concepts that you said today about like, hey, we can incorporate some of these things we like, we want to do that mindset of adding more things in, but how would you specifically talk to that parent in that scenario as they're talking to their kid at home?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I run into that a lot. I will say there are some parents who are not going to change kind of their thought process on that. But a lot of it is listening and asking questions. So something that's been very valuable to me, because I get really like, oh, I don't want to, like, that's not, you know, like, we can't talk about food like that, but you have to, like, take a step back and just, like, help them understand why they're asking that question. So something I learned was to ask 3 questions before you give advice. So, you know, ask some questions like, well, what is it about that food that you know, concerns you? Like, or, well, what might be some other options that you would feel more comfortable with? So having them kind of think about that first, because a lot of times it's more about things internally and their relationship with food than it is about anything else. So it's kind of helping them have that perspective shift and thinking for themselves versus us just telling them. I know we want to share all this nutrition education with people, but a lot of times it's more about why they're eating what they're eating. They need to kind of figure that out too. But helping them just find one small shift and where can we make a compromise too, right? So helping them figure out where they can where are they willing to make a compromise? And different families have different rules, and that's totally fine, and we can respect that as well. So that's a good question.
Any other questions? I shared with Alex, I was the spinach one. So I have a 5-year-old who ate everything when she was a baby, and then just, you know, put a hand up to vegetables for like a year and a half. And the other day she's like, can I have a spinach leaf? And I just like straight face was like, sure, here you go. So we talked about like, you just don't make a big deal about it. And she does hot lunch at school to get more variety added to her plate. She's loving it. She likes to remind me that she gets to choose. Yes. Kids get to choose, Mom, remember that?
Absolutely.
I do have a question. Yeah. So I have a 5, 3, and 1-year-old, and our dinner time is nuts. Everybody's exhausted. Everybody wants to run around and play. And oftentimes my kids that are tired don't eat anything, or they eat a little bit, which is fine. You know, they listen to their bodies. We talk a lot about that. But do you have any tips about we eat with our kids every single night? Do all the things I feel like. Do you have any tips to kind of like help make the scene more calm and keep kids in their seats? Sometimes we shut the lights off and they light a candle, and they love that right now.
Yes.
But do you have any tips for that? Because we struggle with that, and then we don't want our kids to go to bed hungry, and you know, make sure that they're nourishing their bodies appropriately.
Yeah, so I could talk about this all night, but the first thing I like to talk to parents about is that dinner tends to be the hardest meal, and they may not be as hungry at dinner. because they usually load up, they eat more during the day. So I like to tell parents to have a mindset shift of that maybe dinner is more of a snack. Not snack, I don't like how we perceive snack. Snack is a mini meal. Snack isn't a package with, granola bar. Snack is a mini meal. So we need to, I like to help them shift their mindset. They're gonna maybe eat less and that's okay, but where can we, maybe it's an after school snack is more of a larger snack so that we can make sure they're getting something, or maybe there's a bedtime snack incorporated as well. That's difficult also, I get. But yes, I love putting the lights down, setting a candle. We'll do like fancy dinners sometimes where we'll set the table and dim the lights and turn on some nice calm music. Depending on how old your kids are, of course, for other families, we do conversation cards. So if my daughter loves being in charge of reading the cards, she's 8, so it keeps us engaged at the table. I say if you have busy kids, you obviously have to keep in mind choking hazards. Let your kids stand if they want, if they feel like they can't sit in their spot. So I will let my kids stand sometimes, and honestly it helps them stay more at the table. We eat at the counter, but also another thing I'll utilize is a visual timer too, for like, okay, we're gonna all sit down for 5 minutes, and that sounds like not a lot of time at all. But more often than not, they end up staying longer. But if you can have that visual timer for kids, that can be really helpful as well, just to have that. But yeah, great
Thank
question.
you. Any other questions?
Thank you. Oh, another one?
Yeah, I think you talked a lot on Adolescent kind of method too.
Yes, yeah, the division of responsibility. Yes, so we talk about that a lot. Is anyone familiar with Adolescent division of responsibility? So parents get to choose the what and where kids eat, and the kids get to choose if and how much and what's the other if they eat and how much they eat. Yeah, the parents choose when. Parents choose when. Yeah, there's 3 for parents and 2 yes. I'm going to be presenting to Head Start families on Monday about this, actually. Yes, but I like to let families know that there's some flexibility in that, because it can feel really rigid that like, oh, my kid just doesn't want to eat anything, so I'm just they're just gonna go around all day eating air, like that. But no, we can encourage kids to eat and help them engage with food without pressuring and forcing them to eat, yes. So it all depends on the kid too, and I just saw some content out there about you're not supposed to say, just take a bite. Well, you can say that, but if it's causing anxiety in your kid and a bunch of pushback, then like, okay, maybe not, but it's not the end of the world to be like, hey, could you try 2 more bites? So, yeah,
I would be, I've actually complimented people on that, their kids go completely fit.
yeah, then we need to take a step back and look at some other things, yes, that are going on, but yeah. Absolutely, good question, and thanks for bringing that up. Let's bring them up.
I can reach you part way.
Get nice steps, yeah.
So what are some words of encouragement that we can offer to parents? I work with WIC, and some parents are really afraid their child will starve. And especially sometimes when we're trying to cut down on milk because they're consuming 4 or 5 cups of milk, and so no wonder they won't eat, but they give in because they will starve.
Yes, that's a great question. So I think what I like to go to parents and so that they understand, again, I'm doing a lot of mindset shifts for parents, and that's what we're talking about here is I'm always encouraging parents, try to have at least 1 preferred food at the meal, and that, you have something for them. And what we have to look at is not just 1 meal. We get so narrow-minded, right, with that microscope, whether it's with ingredients or with 1 meal our kids are eating, but it's not about just that 1 meal. It's about that whole day, and it's about that whole week, what are our kids eating, right? So they're, letting them know you're doing a great job. You're not alone. Many families struggle with this. It's developmentally appropriate for kids to be picky. There are some red flags that we need to look into other things as well sometimes, but letting them know that they're not alone is huge though too. Good question. And thank you for the work you do.